Thanks for joining today's Synology Partner online training. In this webinar, we'll focus on power users and home users that want to set up a robust home lab, or a content producer, content creator that wants to get the most out of their Synology hardware, particularly how we can take our Plus Series desktop NAS and modify it to enhance your experience to the fullest capacity. We'll start with a walkthrough of Synology's product lines to make sure you understand the difference in product tiers and what you're looking for as you shop for a business versus something you're going to use at home or in a small office. Then we'll spend a few minutes going over software that every Synology admin should be aware of, as well as recommending a few choice software packages that will be especially beneficial if you're using your NAS for personal use. Finally, we'll step outside the NAS and talk about how Synology can help enhance your network environment as well as your on-premise security. Let's begin by discussing Synology NAS hardware. We'll start with an orientation on the differences and specializations of various Synology model lines. Once we get into our Plus Series units, we'll discuss your modification options and why and when you might want to make these modifications. If you use Synology in your office, it's quite likely you're familiar with our larger rack mount servers. The XS and XS Plus series products are a core workhorse model that is going to work great for companies using us as a file server, a backup device, virtual storage, or surveillance for companies with hundreds, sometimes even thousands of employees. If you have needs beyond what the XS and XS Plus can handle, it's likely you'll scale into the SA series products. Moving into the SA tier is going to often add more storage capacity, like if you need a petabyte or more of storage, as well as options for models that have dual controllers. So if you need that built-in redundancy, you look to the SA series. Of course, if you have intensive needs, high IOPS performance requirements, doing multimedia production, database serving, etc., you'll look at our FlashStation series. These all-flash arrays, denoted by FS in the name, are going to deliver the highest speed and processing performance of any of our NAS. If iSCSI is the focus of your deployment and you're using us as attached to virtual storage, check out the UC products. These products are dual active controllers designed for maximum reliability and maximum uptime for virtualization storage specifically. And finally, if you need large quantities of archival storage or large file server deployments, the high density HD series products can scale up to 300 drives and nearly 5 petabytes of raw storage space. But for today's purposes, let's bring it all the way down and look at our Plus Series units. These are ideal for your small office, for your home office, or your home lab. The Plus Series units come in a variety of form factors, all the way from 2-bay up to 12-bay desktop models. We even have a few rack mount options. When it comes to choosing the right Plus Series NAS, you'll want to consider how much capacity you require, and to do that, you'll have to think about your RAID configuration. Now, for most home use, RAID 5 is going to be the most popular configuration, and if your drives are all the same size, I recommend choosing this over SHR. You'll have more performance provided that you keep your drives the same size. With RAID 5, you have one drive of fault tolerance. That means if one of your drives fails, your data will remain healthy. You can take out the failed drive, insert a new drive, rebuild the array, and you're back up and running with your fault tolerance in place. Of course, there's a cost for this extra parity, and that's you're going to lose some capacity due to the RAID fault tolerance. So RAID 5, while giving you one disk of fault tolerance, means that your total capacity will be the sum of all your drives minus the capacity of one drive. With this in mind, for most home lab environments, we'd recommend at least getting a 4-bay NAS. And today, the NAS we're going to choose to talk about is the DS923 Plus. This is a 4-bay NAS that's expandable up to 9 bays with a 5-bay expansion if you need that additional space. In terms of our configuration, we're going to put in 4 12-terabyte hard drives, which would give us 48 terabytes of raw space. Taking away one drive that's lost for parity and fault tolerance will put us down to 36 terabytes. We have to do a little more math beyond this. If you've ever opened up your Windows Device Manager or your Storage Manager and looked at how much space you have available on a brand new hard drive, you'll often notice that it's different than the size that the drive was labeled at on the packaging. For example, a 512 gigabyte laptop hard drive generally yields about 460 gigabytes of actual usable space. This discrepancy is because of a couple things. For one, the file system and the operating system do take up some space. But for two, the conversion from decimal numbering to binary actually creates a disparity. So to account for all this math, once you've already figured out the space lost due to parity, take off another 10% to convert this decimal binary conversion. And also consider that the operating system, the file system, in this case is going to lose a couple more percent. It's actually going to put us down to about 31 terabytes of actual available space. That said, any system running at over 80% capacity will start to slow down. This is true for all laptops, all electronic devices, and it's very similar to the concept of fitting any closet full of 100% storage capacity will make it very difficult to find the items and keep your closet organized because you have to take everything out, shuffle it around. You don't want it to be at 100% jam-packed because it will actually degrade your performance. So if you've ever filled up a laptop or a PC and wondered why it gets slow, it's because you filled up your storage. Synology recommends staying at 80% or below of your actual capacity, which means that with 4 12 terabyte drives, we're actually looking at around 25 terabytes of usable workspace. That's giving us a 20% buffer, which we can use if we need it, but this will give us ideal performance on this 4-bay NAS. With that said, we now have a plan for the NAS we're looking at, the amount of capacity, how do we actually start to dial it in and get the performance that we need. The DS923 Plus has several different hardware modifications that we can pursue. We're going to talk about RAM, network cards, and SSD cache. The 923 Plus can accept 2 RAM modules. In this case, we're talking about DDR4 16 gig modules, bringing us to 32 gigs of total RAM. To install the RAM, all you need are the 2 modules and your bare hands. The first thing you need to do is remove all the drive trays. So pull up on the bottom, they lever outwards and slide right out. With all 4 removed, you'll be able to easily access the internals of the DS923 Plus. If you spin it over and look towards the right side of the unit, you will see the RAM slots. Here you have 2 slots. One is currently occupied with the stock 4 gig chip. Pull that out by pushing your fingers along the sides to the left and right until it levers outwards. You can slide it right out and put the new chip in the same way. Make sure that you line up the slot so all the pins connect properly. Inserting it at about 45-degree angle, get it nested in nicely. Once tucked in securely, just tilt it backwards and you should feel it clip right in. Do the same with the second RAM chip. This one's a little easier because it sticks out further. And you are done. You've upgraded the RAM, and at this point you can reinstall the drives. Like most computers, adding more RAM has tremendous benefits across your workflow. For one, running more application packages simultaneously, you can allocate more RAM to those packages, you're going to have a smoother experience, they're going to be functioning at a more productive level. Also, if you're not running a ton of applications, the user interface is going to become more smooth and more responsive as DSM does utilize that RAM to improve the GUI. And of course, if you're transferring files, your SMB write buffer is going to utilize that RAM to make sure that those large file transfers go even smoother and even quicker. In particular, there's a few packages in DSM that I'd like to highlight in terms of the benefits of upgrading RAM. One of those is Active Backup for Business. And this is a software you use to back up endpoints. If you're attaching a large number of devices to it, say backing up an entire office or a host of virtual machines, this is going to allow you to have more concurrent backup tasks. Synology Drive is a software used to synchronize files between your Synology NAS and your workstations, or to another Synology NAS. With more RAM, Synology Drive can handle a larger amount of maximum files. And if you're using Synology's Virtual Machine Manager, which is our lightweight hypervisor, you can allocate RAM to your VMs. So if you'd like to run several instances of Windows or Linux on that machine, having the additional RAM in your 923 Plus makes it available to allocate to each of those machines, which will in turn allow you to fit the software requirements of whatever it is you're running those machines for. Next, let's talk about a network card. So the E10G22 Mini is a 10 gigabit network card that you can install in the back of the 923 Plus. To throw in the 10 gig card, all you'll need is the card itself and a Phillips screwdriver. If you look at the back of the 923 Plus, you'll see a small plastic cover with 2 screws on it. That's where your PCI slot is. Go ahead and remove the cover using your Phillips head screwdriver, and you'll be able to pull it right off pretty easily. And at that point, you'll just grab the network card and slide it right down into the slot. Once you've got it the whole way in, give it a little press, make sure it's fully seated, replace the screws, and you're done. You've added 10 gigabit network connectivity to your DS923 Plus. Now, the obvious benefit of a 10 gig card is increasing the throughput of that NAS. But keep in mind that your switch will also need to support 10 gig, and your other devices will need to have faster connections, or you'll be able to support, for example, 10 1 gigabit workstations connecting to that NAS and getting maximum throughput. The other thing to consider is devices where maybe you don't have 10 gig, but you have like a 2.5 gig switch, or you're using a Synology router with a 2.5 gig port. The 10 gig card will allow you to take advantage of that as well, as it is backwards compatible to smaller speeds. And regarding compatibility, Synology accessories, particularly RAM, drives, network cards, are designed for Synology servers. They're not tested or developed for other configurations, so please don't put them into Windows machines, Linux machines, or Mac computers. They're just for Synology products. The last upgrade to discuss today is SSD caching. For those of you that aren't familiar, SSD cache allows you to use spinning disk mechanical storage as your primary storage repository, while getting the benefits of the lightning fast read and write speed of SSDs for rapid amounts of data ingestion or accessing your most frequently used data with high speed. Installing the cache is easy. All you'll need are your 2 NVMe M.2 SSDs. For this installation, they're both 800 gigabytes. Flip over the DS923 Plus. You'll see on the bottom, there's 2 tabs you can remove to reveal the M.2 slots. No tools required for this install. With the covers opened, you can now take your M.2 NVMe SSD, make sure you're lining up the pins with the holes properly, and insert it at about a 45-degree angle. And then lever it downwards until it clips in with the small plastic clip. Do the same with the second SSD. And now replace the covers. And you're done. You'll still need to configure the software for your SSD cache, which we also recommend doing after you've populated your NAS to avoid excessive wear on the SSDs. SSD cache will help your performance almost across the board. If you're using us as a file server, this is going to be a great way to access those frequently used files quicker, as well as letting you dump large amounts of data from multiple connections or a single fast connection to the device. Same with virtual storage, SMB, and Fiber Channel. If you're using us as an application database, a read cache in particular will help you serve up that data that's frequently used. So anytime you have a predictable access pattern, a similar data set that you want to be accessing, SSD cache is going to help you out with that. And finally, if you're using some of the BTRFS functionality that relies on metadata, for example, used in both snapshot replication or active backup for business, SSD caching can also improve those performances and allow you to back up larger environments. So we've talked about upgrading your NAS, but what does that actually mean in terms of its raw capabilities of throughput and data transfer? Let's compare a standard 1 gigabit Ethernet laptop to your DS923 Plus. With the 1 gig card, your laptop is going to be able to transfer a little over 100 megabytes a second. If you check out the 923 Plus, its specs do over 200 megabytes a second, both read and write. This is because the 923 Plus has 2 1 gigabit ports. keep in mind that if you have a 10 gig device on this network, unless you're using iSCSI multipathing, you get one link per incoming connection. So they won't actually bond together without additional configuration. Now, if you add the 10 gig card to that NAS, you'll see a tremendous boost, and we start to get a glimpse of what the 923 is capable of. So between 500 and 600 megabytes per second, both read and write, which is essentially the cumulative speed of 3 of those drives working together at once, the 4th being retained for parity. And finally, if we add the SSD cache as well as the NIC, now we're going to see the maximum benefit. Here we get a read speed of over 1 gig per second, 1 gigabyte per second, and a write speed of nearly 800 megabytes per second. Now, this can be sustained for some amount of time, but keep in mind the size of the cache will essentially be your capacity for the amount of buffer that this will provide in terms of how long you can sustain this. Once that's filled, it still needs to spool to the drive. But for most burst access in a personal environment or a small office, this is more than enough to meet your needs. The final component of this build are hard drives. Earlier I mentioned using 12 terabyte drives. And for today's example, we're installing 12 terabyte HAT 3300 Plus series drives by Synology. We do have 2 different tiers of drives. The 5300 series drive is designed for business use, the larger rack mount products that we reviewed earlier. The 5300 series drive is a 5-year warranty, 7200 RPM spindle speed, and these are helium-sealed drives. Meanwhile, the 3300 series is a 5400 RPM spindle speed and comes in a smaller size. And the 12 terabyte actually spins at 7200 and is helium-sealed. So as a pro tip, if you're an enthusiast and you want the peak performance of the series, go with the 12 terabyte drive. Choosing Synology drives over third-party drives is a question people ask us about all the time. And the answer is actually very simple. In addition to being a fantastic drive in terms of performance and reliability, these drives are optimized to work with DSM in particular. If you consider comparing them to a generic drive, a one-size-fits-all drive, Synology only works with a small number of CPUs. We make our own PCBs. We design one operating system. It's very easy for us to narrow the factors and create a drive that works exceptionally well in a single environment. Compare that to a third-party option who's manufacturing products to work with over 30 motherboard manufacturers and hundreds of models, as well as thousands of CPUs and dozens of operating systems. And you can see why we're able to tailor the performance to be substantially higher with Synology drives. In fact, if you're using us in a business environment, you 100% want to go with Synology 5300 series drives, as once you're over 50 tenants in a multi-client deployment, you're going to see speed boosts of up to 100% compared to a generic product like Seagate Exos, for example. So you're getting a much, much faster drive. On top of all that, in terms of supporting the product, any kind of updates, it's all done through DSM, it's all serviced by Synology. You will have a smoother experience, and that's going to save you time if you need any assistance down the line. Okay, that was a lot of information. Here's a full build list showing all the parts and components that we've assembled today in this high-performance 4-bay Plus series desktop unit. Let's move beyond hardware and talk for a few minutes about Synology software. Let's start with a few key features right within the DSM operating system that we think almost every user will want to be configuring and taking advantage of. Then we'll highlight some software packages to help you get the most out of your Synology NAS. If you're building a private cloud with Synology NAS, no doubt you'll want to be able to connect to that data from anywhere in the world. There's a couple steps that we would advise getting in place before you're able to do that. One is to set up an SSL certificate. This can be done right through the control panel with a service called Let's Encrypt. There's no cost to this, and it will allow you to validate your secure connection when you are connecting remotely. Secondly, you'll need to enable Quick Connect. This uses Synology relay servers to create a secure encrypted tunnel to your NAS from your device, wherever it may be. This can also be done through the control panel. There's some backup features that we should go through as well. It's quite likely you've picked this NAS as a way to back up and store large amounts of data. we get a lot of questions about which backup tools we should use for different scenarios. Earlier, I mentioned Active Backup for Business. This is an endpoint backup tool that allows you to take bare metal images of your workstations, as well as image your virtual machines directly through VMware or Hyper-V. This is a great way to get all that data on the NAS. Once it's on the server, you need to back that up, preferably off-site. We'll use Hyper Backup to accomplish this. Hyper Backup creates a compressed, containerized file of your backup data and can push that remotely to the cloud, to a service like Synology C2 or third-party cloud, to another Synology NAS, even to something like a USB device. This way, your backup is stored in multiple places in case of a disaster. And earlier, I talked about Synology Drive as a file synchronization tool to sync data between workstations and from one NAS to another. If you don't need the image-based backup functionality that Active Backup provides, and all you want is simple file-level backup, this is baked right into Synology Drive. In fact, from the desktop interface on your laptop, you can choose to enable file-level backup of that device, and you don't have to worry about adding an additional software like Active Backup for Business. Here's a quick overview of what this environment could look like using Synology Drive. Again, this allows you to synchronize data between workstations, between mobile devices, to the NAS, as well as to a cloud service, and you can control all of this through one primary admin portal. And actually, Synology Drive Admin Console is the name of the software that you'll run on the NAS to determine what data is shared, which users, and so forth. And of course, your user groups and roles and permissions will tie into this as well. With this, you can create a complex file server environment that is a wonderful solution for most small and medium businesses. And what sort of a power user webinar would this be if we didn't take a second to talk about multimedia? You'll want to install Media Server. This will allow you to choose which content is shared over your network with your DLNA supported devices, essentially all your smart TVs. This allows you to store your movies and your media on the NAS and then open up any device without installing software that can live on that same network and access those folders. You can just pull up that content from anywhere else on the premise. If you're doing any kind of photography, or if you enjoy using a cell phone to capture photos, you'll 99% want to be syncing that data to the NAS. And you'll do that with Synology Photos. This application will allow you to sync that data up to the NAS and keep a backup from your mobile devices. It also has AI functionality that allows you to index and search, look for people by name with facial recognition, as well as recognize a whole repertoire of common objects and locations, and even it includes geographical tagging if you'd like to enable that. Basically, you won't lose photos again, and you'll always be able to find the pictures that you're looking for. So once you've had some time to check out those applications, the last thing I want to get into today is actually moving outside the NAS and getting into your local network. Synology manufactures routers that are going to be a great way to not only protect your data, but protect your actual network itself. And with the amount of Internet of Things technology, smart home devices, you probably want to have actual multiple layers to your network to keep your data segmented from some devices which might have less stringent security measures. You can also set up guest networks. You can also do VPN. You can do VLAN. And all of this is available across the router model line. Our flagship router is the RT6600AX. This is a Wi-Fi 6 tri-band router. And start with this as the core of your Synology network system. If you want to go beyond this, the WRX560 is a mesh network node that you can put throughout your premise. So you can position these around your property to increase the coverage of your Wi-Fi. You can also add them as a wired access point if you like. All of Synology router products use the award-winning Synology Router Manager, or SRM software, to give you all these features and total control over your network security. Check out our additional spot videos if you want to deep dive into this functionality. Synology manufactures two different IP cameras, the first of which is a bullet-style BC500. The second is a turret-style camera, or TC500. Both of these are 5-megapixel cameras delivering high-definition footage, rated for weatherproof deployment, so these are excellent to position outside. And they also have night vision and the ability to install an SD card. So if they do lose connectivity to the network, they still record. Once connectivity has been restored, it will upload that footage back to the NAS. And all that footage is going into our software called Surveillance Station. Surveillance Station is a full-featured NVR platform. On our larger units, we can scale up to 10,000 cameras in one system across 1,000 locations. Many of the largest enterprise businesses in the company utilize Surveillance Station as their primary surveillance solution. The great news is that as a power user, you get all the benefits of that functionality at a smaller scale. While you may only need a handful of cameras, you still get features like AI facial recognition. You can do object missing alerts, threshold alerts, configure notifications to go to your phone or to a particular user group, along with snapshots and links to review the footage. You can view this from any mobile device. We could go on and on about how deep NVR solutions you can get with Synology and Surveillance Station. If you want more of that info, check out some of our other resources. Which brings me to our conclusion today. We've covered a lot of content, and there is a lot more to learn on any of these subjects if you're interested. So we talked about hardware, we talked about our product series, everything from our multi-petabyte HD 6500 product to our small plus series units that you probably use at home or in a small office. We discussed different ways to modify and upgrade those NAS depending on what your usage needs are, what applications you're using, and the tangible benefits for each type of upgrade. Then we got into some of our more popular software, including setting up your NAS for remote connectivity, some backup software, and some multimedia functionality. We touched upon our router technology as well as our IP surveillance technology. Put together, this creates a comprehensive solution for your office, for your home, for your business. If you have questions about this, please reach out. Home users can go to our website and submit an inquiry. If you're a business user, email onboarding@synologyamerica.com. If you're a channel partner or interested in becoming a channel partner, email sac_sales@synology.com. And for our friends across the pond, UK_sales@synology.com. Thank you for tuning in for this partner training. We'll see you next time.